Hello, may I, Michael Oliver, welcome you here to this hilltop site at Stourpaine Bushes, where annually is held the great working of steam engines. It's a very great pleasure now for me to remind you people who had the pleasure of seeing this show, I'm sure, and to you people who unfortunately missed it, that you can now see on this wonderful film what took place up here 48 hours ago. As I stand here looking round, memories are very vast. 48 hours ago, 103,000 people seen what you're about to see now. And I would like to thank all the exhibitors, the people who brought the old fairground rides, the authorities, the landowners who give us permission for year after year to come up here. This year we were very fortunate that the sun shone on us throughout. After 8 years of continuous mud, we never thought we'd get it right. And I want you now to sit back and enjoy what I'm sure will be lasting memories for you who came and great pleasure for you who didn't. We look forward to seeing you all again on another occasion, preferably next year. There's nothing to an enthusiast like the preparing of a large showman's engine ready to go to work. Now, this is a really fine engine here. It belonged in Shoalin life to the Murphy family in the northeast of Gateshead. And it was probably one of the hardest worked engines in preservation. It was said that in years gone by, this engine stayed in steam for 8 days at a time. And being a fowler, they were very, very used to hard work and always put up a perfect performance. The Murphy family were known to be fast movers on the road and drive their rides hard. But in this line of business, you've got to be tough on your equipment and keep it in perfect order. The engine is now owned by the Howard family from Ashbourne in Derbyshire. They've restored this engine to absolute perfect condition. And here we see them tightening up the driving belt so they will get absolute maximum performance from the generator. When the ride starts to go, the generator takes up a tremendous amount of load, and if the belt is not equipped in the right tension, then you lose speed. You then obviously drive a slower ride. You can't get in as many rides when the maximum people are there, and of course this means money. Of course, with a show of this size, there's an awful lot that's done behind the scenes before the paying public come in to see the end product. And I imagine that the site up here starts to be prepared about a fortnight before time. Here we see the roundabout having been built by the famous Noyce family, with a few engines getting into position. And of course, one of the great things that is always a worry to me as an organizer is that we get good weather before the show starts, because it's vital that we get good ground conditions to bring all this stuff in. Some of these exhibits weigh over 25 tons, and you can imagine that if we get wet weather, the ruts come in the land, and then we've got it for all the show. We've been very lucky this year, in fact. It's the first time for a matter of 8 years that we've been able to get stuff in without using the winches. In other words, as people have told me, it looks as though the ground is a perfect wicket for this year. Here we see a wonderful engine that's built in Hampshire. It's a Wallace and Stevens 7 horsepower general purpose engine. These were made at Basingstoke and were very popular around this area, because I imagine that if a contractor had a few faults, he could easily hop on a motorcycle or go on with his old bull-nosed Morris car, and in about 2 or 3 hours he could be at Basingstoke Works, and this meant quite a bit to him. This is a wonderful old machine that always comes to Stourpaine. We're very fortunate that we're one of the few rallies that it attends every year. It is now owned in preservation by Mr. Fred Coupland of Boston in Lincolnshire. And it was operated for many, many years. In fact, I think over 50 years, half a century, by the famous Mr. Harry Lee, who was a showman from Bradford. Harry Lee was connected with steam yachts in Shoalin life all his life. In fact, he must be one of the very, very few showmen who all his life, as a showman, operated the only one ride. Most people do change rides to keep up with the time. They've got to get fresh rides because, you see, showmen usually operate in the same area every year. And to bring in fresh rides mean that everybody else, especially the teenagers, want to operate on that ride.
This one in here, somebody's been kidding it.
This is a very interesting ride here that's standing by Harry Lee Steam Yachts. It's the largest ride still travelling, and it's the Rodeo Switchback. Now, this ride used to operate in Shoalin life by the Wilson family of London. And of course, like all these old slow rides, they just went out of business because they could not take any money. And it ended up actually on the amusement park at Southsea in Hampshire of the Manning family. One of the people who's played a very major part in the restoration of this machine is Vicky Potheswaite, who has done all the painting at home in her own workshop. She's a very talented young lady, and we were fortunate enough to find a chap called Billy Hall, who 60 years ago used to operate in the Orton and Spooner workshops at Burton-on-Trent, and he came and gave her a little bit of advice on the final touching up of how to do this painting, and he remarked to me that there was very, very little that he could learn her. She was really a self-taught person. Well, things are hotting up now and beginning to take shape. I always feel that when the Noise Roundabout has all its rounding boards on the top, that we're really getting to D-Day, because these guys work as fast as anybody, and there's thousands of working parts on this machine, and in fact there are 4,000 bulbs that light the thing up just like a thing at Christmas. It's a wonderful thing. There's Jimmy Noyce, one of the partners. Their family have had this since 1950. The machine was purchased from a scrap heap in Southampton during the 1950s, where it was time to go and be cut up, believe it or not. And now it must be one of the most famous pieces of fairground equipment travelling. Brings in people from all over the country who love to come and see it operating and listen to its marvellous 89-key organ. It's reputed that this organ carries the most extensive library of fairground music on any machine in the country. They can play everything here from Knees Up Mother's Brown to Abide With Me for a church service. The switchback is now in operation, giving it a trial run, because these machines are put up and they're checked and checked and checked again, not only for the safety but for the income of the machine. They cannot afford to take a minute off once the people are there. There's Stephen Potheswaite checking that the tracks are in perfect line, because obviously one of the great things of a machine of this type, if the wheel comes off the track, that can be disastrous, not from a safety angle but from a hold-up time. Vicky Potheswaite, his wife there, is weighing up from the inside. They know exactly how these machines should run, and they can even tell by the sound if they're not going round properly. The first computer, this, an organ being fed with cardboard music with holes punched. This tells the notes what to lift and operate, and then the wind goes up that certain pipe and you get your sound. It's a fantastic thing, a fairground organ, because you can put into it any modern tune if you've got the music cut, and it'll play it just as if it's an orchestra. And of course, one of the most fascinating things is the beautiful carved work of the models on the front, especially the bandmaster. Often children will stay there with their mouths open. I've seen kids in prams watching it for hours, and many mother will tell you that they only get a bit of peace when they come and go in front of these machines at Stourpaine. This is a lovely organ. It's Benny Irvin's 89-key merengue. It's just been refurbished actually by a firm called Page and Howard in London. Very, very popular organ, especially in the London area. It's been with the family for near on, I suppose, a century. There's Timmy Blythe, an organ builder, and he's a very talented young man, but he's helping Stephen Potheswaite down there. It's all hands on deck when this thing has got to be built up, and many enthusiasts come to the scene. Here we see Bill Cole, who's the managing director of the famous firm of Bernard Cole and Sons from Southampton. There's Showman, who's been in this area now for, well, nearly 100 years. And you can nearly set your clock, as an old man said to me, and what time of the year it is by Cole's fun fairs pulling in to the various events they travel. They travel mainly from Bridport in the south to Bristol in the far west and up to the Salisbury Andover area, and of course around Southampton, their home base city. In fact, this machine has been with the Cole family since 1932. It's one of the oldest sets of Dodgems still travelling, and I must say it is equal to anything on the road. They've kept it in fantastic order. For a thing that's 50 years old and had the bumping about of these cars, they spend a tremendous amount of time every winter keeping it in top level. There they are putting the nets up. This is what conducts the current from the motors in the machine up to the top, because as you appreciate, they're on rubber tires, perfectly safe, these bumping cars, but they've got to get the current in from somewhere, and it's sent down the shaft at the back, which goes up and sparks and rubs along the wire netting at the top. There's a young member of the Cole family. That's the 5th generation, so I'm sure this name will still reign throughout these counties for some time to come yet. This is a wonderful name in heavy haulage, the Scammell from Watford firm. Scammells are very, very popular with showmen. Of course, they mainly fit the Gardner engine that is made at Petrocroft up in Manchester, but some have a few Leyland engines and a few have Meadows. But I suppose to a showman, they're all after the very great engine of Gardner's because they're so well governed and they're very, very light on fuel, most economic. These are really the vehicles that took over from the steam engine. And in fact, Scammells of Watford drew up plans just after the war, and they produced what they call the show track, and many showmen used these. As many said at the time, so easy to press a self-starter button and get going on the road, when in the old days you had to be up 2-3 hours previous to get steam up before you could move. Here we see our friends from TVS. They've come to have a look at the old ride. I notified them that the ride was out for the very first time at Stourpaine Bushes, which was quite a boost to us because, you know, this brings in a lot of enthusiasts, and then they tell one another at work and in the pubs. And anything like this on the site can give you an increased gate of sometimes up to 10 or 12,000 people.
Not for 60 pence forever, but it hasn't cost me just 4 an hour. It's a nice sunroof, and we can use all these shots, can't we? It's a nice sunroof, yeah? Alright. Good evening to you too. Right. Okay, it's not too good up hills. Alright. Now we need a fairly good signal system to get the buggy started. Be back! Got to start the Jenny first.
This is a very interesting thing that's going up here now. It's known as a striker, and this has been in this particular family for many, many years. In fact, well over a century. It was supplied new to John Smith, the chap who owns it now, his grandfather. It then came down to John's father, Charles. It's been now handed down to John, and he tells me it'll be handed down to his son, John Jr. It's a fascinating machine, this. It's known as a striker, and as many of you I'm sure will know, you hit the mallet onto the peg and then you drive the thing up and you hope to ring the bell. Now, it doesn't look much of a thing. It's very small compared to riding machines, but these can take a lot of money. If they're situated in the right place outside of a pub, you've got all these strong men coming outside, especially if they're with their girlfriends, and if one rings the bell, then I'm afraid they all go crazy to try and prove their strength to their young ladies, and often you will see John tip off a man to come forward to ring the bell to get the ball rolling. He obviously can't do it himself because they know him. But here we see the bell going up to the top. It's most interesting, that, because I've never realized how they got it up there even myself. a wonderful, fascinating little machine here. It's a 52 keyless Dean organ, built by Michael Dean himself. A very, very clever man. He was a cabinet maker. He had to go up making a machine, and now he's inundated, actually, to make these organs. And they're much more powerful than they look. They're equal to an 89 key. This is the administration area. This is where everything is controlled from. I've got a telephone in there. I've got walkie-talkie, and everything that goes on both in, out, and around the site is conducted from here. I'm often called away, but that's my helpers there. I'm often in the thing there for probably 5 and 6 hours at a time during each show day. I'm trying to conduct something there with the look of things. There's Betty Marsh, our social secretary. She's also a director of Dorset Steamfair. I've got to spend a couple of days before the show actually standing up in the entrance to try and direct everything to the right location. I imagine that for the 48 hours before the show is the hardest time that everything goes on, because we're trying to get everything to the correct position. There goes Jim Searle on his bicycle. He's the owner of the famous Borough Scenic Showman's, the Prince of Wales from Horsham. Wonderful family, the Searles. They're great in preservation. They own about 4 engines and a beautiful Gavioli organ. Helpers there are awaiting the arrival of different sections. One of the things that we've got to make sure is that everybody is signed to get to the correct place. Nothing worse when you've done a 200-mile journey and then you find you can't find your location. And of course, if you've paid money to go onto a certain site, if you're a market trader, you want to know where you've got to go. Interesting load. Tractors arriving for the vintage tractor section, and I see there a comb wheat reading machine. This belongs to the famous family of Brents from Callington in Cornwall. Triple axle trailer there. This has just come up from the Cornwall area. Not only do the large machines need to be took to Stourpaine, but also the little ones in all sizes. Here we see a motorcycle that has arrived in, because a lot of these things are not taxed for the road, although a lot of them do use them in the summer, but it's quite easy to bring them in a trailer, and this one is being unloaded there. There's Max Hancock, the motorcycle section leader. And we have at Stourpaine Bushes probably one of the greatest collections of motorcycles in Europe.
No, I don't think she was standing up here on the foot of ground like that.
Yeah.
Last year we was way up the car park.
Oh, hello. Right.
Yeah. Right, Peter?
Every time you go up.
Well, it depends on which section you mean.
It's quite interesting that Bill Brent has got the oldest herd of Devon cattle in the land, and he had the great honour of entertaining the Prince of Wales, our future king, at his premises. And there is Bill, a very, very cheerful fella, and it was a great honour to him, I know, when he had the Prince of Wales on his farm, staying there. There's his son, Robert. And they had a 3-day opening there of all the Devon cattle breeders. They assembled there because, of course, Prince Charles is their patron.
There's, what do you do? We look at all the cameras, what do you do? All right, then. Almost well, right? Hello, Robert. All right, then, maybe keep on. Sarah? Oh, that's the way you
There we
know
go.
it.
Yeah, there.
Oh, yeah. Spanners here, wouldn't stop it. Wait, here. Oh, yeah. Spanners here, wouldn't stop it. Wait, here. Well, you want?
Alongside that train. Yeah, no, that's 5 lorries coming.
5?
Yeah. Got Red for the president. Rodman. The trawler. There we are. Yeah. Some of the
There's Gerald Mundy there with his wife Serena. They operate the vintage working tractor section.
Good.
With a red, white and blue chip van that looked like a fish and chip type of vehicle with a motorcycle on a trailer. And he pulled out in front of me as I approached him out of a lay-by, and he didn't do more than about 25 miles an hour. Frustrating that was, very frustrating, because he couldn't get by him. Couldn't get by.
Did you have a good time over in Holland?
Oh, you
Johnny photos, right? Look that.
we haven't got them back yet. Everywhere we went, it was open house, meal when you got there, and enjoy everything. They're such friendly people. We spent 3 nights with families, and 3 nights in the what we call the pony park. Yeah, 3 nights there. Oh, 4 nights we had at the pony park. 3 full days. And 4 nights. I mean, if you can just picture 112 acres, a lot of it is woodland, and they've got cabins set out in the trees, summer house, chalets, you know the type of thing. And then they've got 112 acres of this, and the big wheel stands 150 feet high. Now, I don't know how high this wheel is, but 150 foot...
3 times the height of that.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, it is. And then there's a gadget there, what they call it, a roller coaster. It's all free, yes. It's all free. The roller coaster, I'm afraid, I've got a big yellow line down the middle of my back. I wasn't going on the roller coaster. Not loop-the-loop, the roller coaster. Oh, dear. It was certainly a most memorable trip. But if you could have seen us when we got to Zeebrugge, and we met the fellow there in the customs, he'd given us a sort of a bit stern he was when we went out, but it was a different fellow when we came back. And when I knocked on the door and gingerly opened it to go in, he said, "Come in." Well, when he looked at our document and he says, "Oh, you have models?" I said, "No, full-size tractors. They're out there in the yard. I'll show them to you if you've got the time." I got the time, boom, 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 on the with his rubber stamp, and tear out a page, come out, unlock the door, locked up his office, and they went out in the yard and admired the tractors.
Yeah, I didn't get back in time, but you've seen it flying on telly, didn't you? On TV.
Yeah, I did. I saw you on TV
HTV covered us going away, yeah. But we did 1,160 miles. How about that? There must be some sort of a record to go to a rally, isn't it?
Oh, no, yeah.
1,160. Just couldn't believe that it was so far.
Now they're about to start up the Field Marshal, and it's the most complicated affair really. It's the only diesel that you can start without batteries, and they're very, very reliable. It's a 2-stroke single-cylinder machine, and in fact they do resemble a little bit in design the old-fashioned steam engine. What you do is you prime up the cylinder with diesel fuel till you see a vapor coming out of a little plug hole in the front. You then light a cartridge and put it in, and then when you wink round, the compression is obviously built up onto the end of that tap he's putting in, and she bursts away. And they'll start every time, no matter what the weather, if you can turn them over. This is quite a tricky operation. You must get both wheels firmly secure on these skids, or else you can have disaster. I have known tractors tip over. Fortunately not at Stourpaine. Welcome, Bill, to Stourpaine Bushes with your first exhibit. Well, this year, that is. Now, one of the characteristics about the Field Marshal is that you had this continuous shaking, and this was not very popular with some owners that were having implements on the rear of them. This is why they were so popular for working on the belt, because obviously this then didn't affect any machine that they were handling because it was absorbed through the belt itself. And of course, another characteristic of the Field Marshal was a nil return oil system. And often when they were under heavy load, they would blow oil out and you'd go home diggered in soot and your shirt would be speckled up, and this didn't please the wives too pleased. Now that's a famous name, I'm sure, in preservation that many people know. W. Brent, Clampett Farm, Callington, Cornwall. They're very popular people all over the West Country, and they own an awful lot of machinery. Bill has saved and Robert many things from the scrapyard and cutting torch. Now this is an interesting exhibit and a wonderful sight to see, because I was wondering at one time where this would arrive. This is Tom Varley's latest acquisition, the big 115 key Veerbeck organ. Now Tom has for a long time been trying to buy a big organ. He's already got an 89 key, but he wanted one of the big ones. You can see how pleased I am there that he should come, because if things weren't ready, we wouldn't have... There is Tom with a pipe in his mouth. Tom's an orphanage boy that was brought up in a home, and he's not... And there's David, his son, a wonderful lad. Now he's brought this thing down from Clitheroe in Lancashire, and in the preservation world, everybody's been waiting to hear this. This is the first time that this will be seen, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen here on this. I'm full of praise for Tom to bring it to us and support us when it's really not completely finished in decoration.
Thank you.